Welcome to the Spotlight video on Vygotsky in the classroom and some lessons that I have seen that align closely with sociocultural theory. So the first one was a geography lesson looking at students being able to identify all of the states on a US map. So the teacher began with passing out a blank map and just allowing each student some time to fill in as many states as they knew. Right? And then this is going to give this teacher a baseline of where students are at, right? And you're going to see a variety of levels, but it's going to kind of give you a baseline to gauge where you are beginning. So that's kind of the bottom of the zone of proximal development. Then the teacher can look at, the maps, and let's pretend, one of these maps, it shows that the student seemed to know where a lot of the Midwest states were, maybe kind of around where they lived, and then some states that were really unique in shape, like California, Texas, Florida, but there were a lot of empty spaces as well. And so the teacher decided, because this was pretty consistent across students, that she was going to have them work in groups and focus on a region. And so like one group had kind of the Northwest, another had like the South, the Northeast, to really focus on and create some ideas for how the class could remember where states would go and then share that with one another. So kind of moving into this interpersonal zone of where we are supporting each other's learning between people. You could also use another scaffold, maybe a video, right? Something online that you find that can also help them develop a greater awareness of where states were going and ways to remember it. Like this Go Noodle video has kind of a silly song that goes along with it to remember something interesting about each state. And then they use kind of the scaffolding of, as we talk about this state, you're going to see it in red on the map. So you can that can help your memory with where it actually goes in relation to other states. And so that would be another example. And then eventually the teacher would want to know, is this learning moving from interpersonal to intrapersonal, where it becomes internalized? And so giving out the map again, would a student be able to fill in all of those states, right? And Vygotsky would say learning is not complete until they could do that on their own. Now let's pretend that a student, when the teacher handed out the blank map, was actually able to do this on their own. Okay, so if they're able to already complete this task, you have to come up with some creative ideas of how to move them into their zone of proximal development. Because just saying, hey, do it again, or help your neighbor is not moving them forward, even though it's an easy go-to in the classroom. And so maybe you'd say, okay, now I need you to try to start identifying the capitals, or I need you to create some type of mnemonic or video to help other students know how to identify these states, but something above and beyond of just doing more of the same or helping other people. That's what Vygotsky would say you would need to do to enhance the student's learning. Another lesson I saw was about ants, okay? And so the teacher began by saying, I want you to just start brainstorming on your notebook, write down what you know about ants. So again, this is getting at the baseline of what a student might know and what they can do on their own. And then she brought everyone together to think about, okay, let's share what's on our list. And so she was able to compile just kind of on one of those big white Post-its. Somebody said they can be different colors, they seek out water and food, they live in colonies, they are social creatures, they carry things. Ants don't have ears, which I did have to fact check, and that is true. And they live on every continent. And so they're already helping each other socially, right? Because the knowledge of one is enhancing the knowledge of the other as they share that collectively. Then the teacher said, you know what? I want us to focus on this one. They can carry things. There's a really interesting fact that ants can carry at least 50 times their body weight. And I want us to get to the bottom of that. I want us to figure out how we can explain how that's possible, because humans can't do that. So she broke them up into groups and said, with your small group, find out how this is possible. And you can use any of the resources in your room, including your computer. So now we're tapping into cultural tools, right, that we know can also form as scaffolds and that are necessary for problem solving and communication. And then eventually, when you've figured out how to explain that fact, you need to draw an image to represent something you discovered. Okay, and so now you have to create some type of representation of that knowledge. And Vygotsky would say, again, this is part of the learning process. Then each group selected one person to present the group's drawing, as well as talk about how it explains the fact. So as each group was presenting, the teacher would then provide further scaffolding with questions, clarifications, and prompts, again, moving these groups even beyond what they were able to do with some of their peers. But then Vygotsky would say, is this over? Like each group has presented, we've talked about it together, are we done? he would say you are not finished because you have to figure out, has this information been internalized with everyone at the individual level? So how do we know if the learning has become intrapersonal? Well, there are lots of options for this. Some teachers, give individual quizzes or tests. But Vygotsky would probably say, it might be something a little bit more embedded in kind of the cultural practices of a classroom, a little bit more natural, direct. So maybe like an exit slip where the teacher said, okay, now in your own words, I want you to write out how you would explain that fact or something else you learned today. Okay. Or maybe the teacher does really quick individual conferences with each student, taking the image they created with their group and just saying, hey, can you explain this to me just one-on-one, and then being able to assess whether the student kind of has met those objectives for the lesson or not.